Broad streams, if you haven't already been over, would love to have you take a look at Sober Now's Facebook page. Give that a quick like. You'll get notifications for future live streams and other content that we're putting out. Sobriety doesn't necessarily make everything better. It largely prevents things from getting a whole lot worse. It does improve health and it creates a million possibilities, but it doesn't necessarily change our attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. And that's actually one of the very best definitions that I've ever heard about what recovery is. The definition says that it's the awareness of attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that block change. That was given to me by a dear friend many years ago, and I have found it to be true. So what we're looking to overcome is the nature of the addictive personality, which of course is based in the addictive brain. The disease of addiction lives in our brain, stunts every area of growth, including the development and evolution of identity. We learn to challenge that mindset through mindfulness. Mindfulness is a nice word that therapists use, meaning, hey, you got to pay attention to yourself. My learning to differentiate what is the disease from what is self. So in other words, what is the disease telling you versus what is it that you're thinking about wanting? What is you and what is the disease? Because the disease will weaponize anything that it can. Most often it'll utilize any form of mental illness. It'll prey upon it. Past trauma, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harm. All of these are things that the disease will try to use. It'll use our insecurities, explaining why we're apart from, the idea that nobody likes us. It'll leave us projecting our self-image and deciding that everybody else must feel the same way about us. The disease wants us to believe that we're simultaneously not good enough and probably too much. I'm fond of the expression that my friends in AA use, that my disease wants me dead, but it'll settle for miserable. The disease wants us to be vulnerable and scared. It wants us isolated and trapped inside our own heads. This remains a warehouse for bad ideas, especially when I'm struggling and isolated. It wants us overdoing things, anything that's unhealthy, and it wants us avoiding anything or anyone that is healthy for us. There's a story I like to tell that was passed down to me by an old-timer many, many, many years ago. He came in to see me and he was really in a rough place. And I said, okay, what's going on with you? And he said, well, I was at a meeting earlier today, and all throughout the meeting, my disease kept telling me, hey, there's a plate full of oatmeal cookies in the back of the room, and you should go get all of them and eat them immediately. And I kind of chuckled and said, okay, I get why that would bother you, but is it really that big a deal? And he looked at me and said, you don't understand. I hate oatmeal cookies. So that's kind of, those are the links, and that's the cunning, baffling, and powerful effects that we come to expect. With continued growth and healing through the course of recovery, we come to understand the nature of our thinking, the nature of our personalities, and we start exploring what is the real emptiness here, what is the void that demands to be filled. Because we certainly tried filling it with things other than drugs and alcohol. We tried filling it with food, sex, relationships, money, careers, and a whole lot of other things that may or may not have value. They're just not what's going to fill that emptiness. That emptiness is what my friends in AA call a God-shaped hole or a God-sized hole. And expressions, it might be a little bit counterintuitive. I think what some folks interpret that saying to mean is that having faith or having a relationship with a higher power just immediately fills that emptiness. And that's not my interpretation, nor is it my experience. My experience is that having faith in a higher power means that people, places, and things, situations, and learning experiences are always being placed in my path. I have to have a mindset, an awareness, an attitude in which I can receive them. And that is what fills the emptiness for me. In the end, relationships and experiences are what truly matter. And those are the things that I crave. Those are the things that fill that emptiness. I've also learned that as I let go of resentment and past pain, as I face fears and overcome them, I make more room for the good stuff. I make more room to receive joy and contentment and fulfillment and all of the things that I most want to have in our lives. So as we step back and continue to heal and grow, I think one of the opportunities in recovery is spotting patterns in our life. And this is one of the manifestations of addictive thinking and addictive personalities, is that too often there's this circular nature to the things that we try to bring into our life, the changes that we try to make. And I guess it's kind of like the fishbowl effect. If you ask a fish to describe water, it can't, because it's surrounded by it, it's all it knows. In early recovery, it's so hard for us to really step outside of ourselves and try to get a better perspective, a better view of what it is that's going on in our lives. So I'm always encouraging folks, have people in your life that are willing to challenge you. Get that support that you need, not just for encouragement and feel-good stuff, but for somebody to call you out on your stuff, somebody who can point out your blind spots, somebody who can say, hey, here's some things in your life that I think you're not paying attention to. I was having a conversation with one of my therapists recently, and she was telling me about a young person in recovery that she's working with. And for the therapist, it's very easy usually to see the patterns in a person's life, because it doesn't harm us or scare us or hurt us to see those patterns. So if you're on the outside looking in, it's usually pretty easy to spot them. And everything that she had tried to get her client to be more aware of those patterns really wasn't working. And so I asked her, does your client post a lot on social media? And she said, yeah. I said, okay. Have her look through her own timeline, her own postings of, say, the past 3 years, and ask her to just notice, does she see a pattern? Does she see a recurring theme going on? And very quickly she did. As she scrolled through her own Facebook page, her own Instagram posts, and such things, she started noticing this pattern where she was talking about falling in love and how this was the perfect love and this is what she'd been waiting for. And then there'd be a post about the toxicity of men and how terrible they are. And then there'd sooner or later be a post about how wonderful it was to be single. And that pattern kept recurring pretty obviously, to the point that it was clear to see on her Facebook wall, much less in her life. So sometimes we need those outside reminders. We need to have tools that allow us to get a different perspective. And we need people that are going to help us achieve that mindset. For an awful lot of us, the biggest manifestation of being having an addictive personality is that we don't really accept our own limits. We're constantly pushing. We're human doers. We're not really human beings because we don't know how to just be. We're human doers because we derive our sense of worth from what it is that we create, or the amount of work that we do, or the amount that we produce. And nothing ever feels like enough. So we're locked into patterns of constantly striving. We're locked into the idea that I'll feel better when I get there. And so maybe there is a promotion, or there is purchasing the item that you most want, or there is something that you've defined as, that's what's going to make me happy. And of course, as soon as we get there, we almost immediately find that there's another progression, another step, another thing to acquire or achieve or become. And so learning to just be means doing things that are actually kind of hard for us, like learning how to relax, learning how to be in the moment, learning how to take things one day at a time. None of these are really simple or conducive to the addictive brain. But the good news is that all of these things are actually very easy to understand and very hard to put into practice, because they are contrary to how we have lived. Unfortunately, so much of the addictive brain is based in the idea of competition. Too many of us grew up learning that there isn't enough of anything good. And we have these simple but very powerful associations from our families of origin, from our past experience, and sometimes even from the places that addiction took us. We expect the same things have to keep happening. We expect that we have to be in competition with others because if they get theirs, then I can't get mine. It's actually one of my favorite Facebook memes. I'm not competing with anyone. I hope we all win. But again, growing up, especially in families where addiction is present, we too often learn that there isn't enough, and so cooperation or collaboration or doing things together just doesn't come naturally to us. What comes naturally is competition. What comes naturally is to resent the success of others instead of potentially learning from them or benefiting from their experience. Our egos, of course, are wrapped up in the competition. It's the desire for recognition and to be valued. But sadly, it usually plays out as something like the expression that my friends in AA use, pick me, choose me, love me. So often we're trying to get really important needs met without being terribly familiar with what those needs are and being realistic and healthy in the ways in which we try to fill that emptiness and get what it is that we need. I think a lot of us are locked into the idea of making up for lost time, the years that we lost in the course of addiction, or we're just in some hurry to get somewhere. We want to become something greater, and we struggle to let people help us become that. So I'm often challenging folks that I serve as to how it is that they define success and what that looks like for them, because I think that's one of the real keys. Somehow in 2021, different versions of the American dream endure, based on the idea that if you work hard and achieve things, you're going to arrive at happiness, and that just isn't my experience. So I often quote a passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson that's referred to as his definition of success, and it's not anything that is really congruent with prevailing social norms, but it is completely congruent with the literature of different 12-step programs. It's congruent with the experience that I've had in knowing and loving people who are in recovery. So the definition reads this way: success, to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by virtue of a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. To me, that definition encapsulates a great deal about what intimacy is, about what love can be, and about the type of connection that I most crave. And I would suggest that all of us crave that. But one of the biggest challenges in overcoming an addictive brain and an addictive personality is that everything we want is also everything we fear. All of us crave intimacy. All of us want those deep connections, not just romantically, but in our friendships and with family and in every part of our lives. But, again, that hinges on things like vulnerability, which for most of us is terribly uncomfortable. The addictive mind seeks to manipulate and control. The person who comes from a place of vulnerability seeks to be understood and open and to connect through empathy, through compassion with the experiences of others, and to make those experiences shared, not a competition, not something that only benefits some. But let me check in with the streams real quick. Again, I always welcome your questions and comments. See how folks are doing today. Thank you for the folks who have chimed in, and if you're watching the stream after the fact, I'd really love to hear your questions and comments. What's going on with you, and how does this topic hit home for you? I was talking with someone near and dear to me recently who has long-term recovery, and he's making some pretty big plans. He is starting his company. He's got a vision. And every time we talk in recent months, it feels a lot like how conversations with myself used to sound Because with each conversation, his plans get a little bit bigger and a little bit more extensive. And so after a number of these conversations, he asked me for some feedback, and I just asked him, how much is enough? And he was kind of stunned, kind of silent there for a minute. So I quoted a lyric from the Grateful Dead. The song is "I Need a Miracle," and the lyric is, "Too much of everything is just enough." There's very few things that I can feel like, okay, that's enough. I've succeeded. I'm completely satiated, full. Food is sometimes easy for me to feel like, okay, that's enough. My body's telling me that it's full. I know that setting goals, specific goals with measurable objectives is really important for me, because otherwise just continuing to prosper or succeed doesn't feel like enough. I've learned to be very careful of what it is that I expect from myself, because for too long I defined success as surpassing expectations, having things go beyond anything that might have been expected of me. At this point in my journey, I really only make plans so that I can listen to my higher power laugh. My plans continue to not work at all, and what my higher power wants for me is so much greater than anything I might think I want. I marvel at the contradictions within myself. How is it that I can manage to be so grateful, and yet at times I feel almost greedy? I know that it's okay to want more. I want to ensure that wanting more doesn't result in me failing to appreciate what I have. It's kind of extraordinary to me, and I'm very blessed because I get to work with people who have lost everything on a regular basis. So it's a reminder to me that my basic life needs are always met, and there are things that I take for granted, and so I appreciate the reminders of that. It's not every day that I think about how great it is that I always have a roof over my head, I always have running water, I always have food to eat, I have clothes to wear, I have all of my basic life needs are met. And the more that I seek connection and the more that I grow spiritually, the more fulfilling my life becomes, the more satisfaction I get to experience. It hasn't always been this way. I was not taught to live this way. I did not grow up this way. It has taken a lot of work on myself to get to this place, and I most certainly did not do this alone. I've had a lot of wonderful teachers along the way, and those are all people that my higher power put directly in my path. They weren't necessarily people that I sought out. They weren't even necessarily people that I welcomed into my life. There were just times where I realized there's something important here for me to learn. There's something important here for me to receive. I learned that for much of my life I was a one-way street. I would give, but I wouldn't take. And so I've learned a great deal about vulnerability and how much it simplifies things and how much it creates possibilities in my life. I've seen way too many miracles not to have faith that there is something, and I simply choose not to make any real effort to understand my higher power, but rather to experience my higher power. And I advocate this approach to others. I know that living in the moment and just being in today is what makes an awful lot possible in my life. I think sometimes about a story that Kurt Vonnegut told in one of his books. He had an uncle who was apparently forever saying, well, if this isn't nice, what is? And it was simply a way of expressing gratitude and drawing attention to the fact that things are good, that there is much to be grateful for. And that attitude, that mindfulness, that awareness, it serves me well. At other times, I have to catch myself because, well, the way I usually explain it, a good friend of mine happens to be a food addict, and we were having lunch together one time, and I made some comment about how good the food is. And she was saying, I really enjoy it, and I'd enjoy it a whole lot more if I wasn't thinking about the next thing I'm going to eat. And so even with things as simple as food, I think sometimes we fail to fully appreciate, fail to savor, or to fully enjoy things because we have a mindset of what comes next or what's after this. And so I offer these as things to notice and work on. Rebecca, thanks for writing in. I would say I noticed before I came into recovery that others would only value me for what I could do for them, and I drew my value from that, but don't consciously remember seeking it. Only in the last 4 years or so have I been able to seek connection, and wanting it is new for me. Thank you for sharing that. Too often, the people that we gravitate towards and that become part of our life are just folks that are familiar to us. We tend to gravitate towards the familiar. So the kind of people that we grew up with become the kind of folks that we seek out or befriend in life. And to only be appreciated for what we do is, of course, heartbreaking. It's also the nature of conditional love and conditional acceptance. Seeking out folks who appreciate us for who we are, who love us unconditionally for who we are, makes me think of my friends in NA. When I first started to get to know people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I marveled at how much they hugged each other and how they would express appreciation for each other. But then when I started to get to know a lot of people in Narcotics Anonymous, I was amazed. They're 10 times huggier than people in other programs, and they don't hesitate to tell you that they love you. And everything about that is so beautiful to me, because this is a big part of how we heal and grow. This is a big part of how we fill the emptiness and get things that in truth we have always needed. But so much of what we're trying to make up for at this point in our journey are things that should have been ours from day one. So I invite you to maybe do some journaling on that. What are the things that you're seeking in your life today? What are the things that are missing? By all means, as Rebecca points out, asking for help is difficult, but it's absolutely vital that we do so. And I think it's easier when we keep in mind that it helps them to help us. The only way to keep it is to give it away. So when we allow people, whether it's in a program or folks that we come to know through, anywhere, but especially in support groups and group therapy, people that we know struggle similarly, when we allow them to be of service to us, it helps them to maintain the gains that they've made, feel good about what it is that they've been through, and of course it creates endless potential for new friendships and folks who don't just take from us, but also want to give to us. So, going to be wrapping it up in a moment, but as always, I want to encourage you to connect with me. Jim@sobernow.com is the easiest way to do that. Very much welcome your questions, your comments, and would love to hear from you topics that you'd like to see covered in future live streams. Please, by all means, head over and check out some of our resources. Sober Now's YouTube channel is over 160 videos now on various aspects of recovery, completely free. And by all means, check out our website, sobernow.com. We moved to a subscription service, so our home study programs were already confidential, already based in anonymity, and now they're more affordable than ever. So for under $15 a month, you have access to those programs, fortifying your recovery, or if you're like me, if you're an affected other who has loved ones in active addiction, then those programs would serve you well in terms of how do you care for yourself and your family as you continue to go through something that is heartbreaking and very, very hard. So, thanks for joining in. Please drop me a comment and a like. It really helps with the algorithms. But most of all, please take excellent care of yourself, and I'll look forward